Hey everyone, we're back for chapter 14 of the Adventures of Will Irving, Automaton Trouble. Here we go. So you know where he is? Emily asked excitedly. I think so, but I'm not sure, Will replied. Is it going to be dangerous? Emily inquired cautiously. It might be, Will answered honestly, but that's part of the job. I know, Emily said quietly. Be careful, okay? I will, Em, Will agreed. I promise. Will. Hey, Will, interrupted a voice. Will started and looked over to see Hank sitting next to him on the front seat of the car. Hank looked back with a puzzled expression. Max was sitting quietly in the back seat. You listening? I said it might be a good idea to go down 4th, Hank said. Yeah, okay. Sorry. My mind was drifting, Will replied. I was thinking about Em. Oh, I thought maybe you were daydreaming about Claire, Hank said with a chuckle. Claire? Come on, Will said coyly. So you can dish it out, but you can't take it, huh? Hank teased. Max gave a laugh. Touche. Fair enough, Will acquiesced. But seriously, though, we gotta be careful tonight. We're all Em has. If something happens to us, nothing's gonna happen, Hank encouraged. We'll be careful. If the coast is clear, we make a move. If it's too hot, we bide our time. Simple as that. Don't worry about Emily. Just stay focused, one step at a time. I know. You're right. Thanks, Hank, Will said. Will turned down 4th Street and drove until they reached the dock district. At the corner of 4th and Magnolia, Will pulled alongside the curb and parked the car. Off to their right down Magnolia, they could see a large single-story building with signage that read Sally's Seafood Emporium. Well, there it is. And that looks like Mo's car, Hank noted, discreetly pointing to one of the vehicles parked outside. We'd better just stake it out from here for a while, Will suggested. Hank nodded in agreement. Max, keep an eye out behind us, Will said, looking in the rearview mirror. Max gave a slight nod and turned to keep watch out the rear window. Over an hour passed in dark silence, save for a few passing cars, as the 3 friends kept their vigilant watch. Suddenly, Hank elbowed Will. Hey, look, Hank said with quiet excitement. Will looked toward the Emporium and saw 2 men leave the building and walk to the car Hank had identified as belonging to Mo. Julius and Mo, Will stated. They're leaving, Hank said as Julius and Mo drove away. Now's our chance. Will waited a moment longer and then started the car. He turned onto Magnolia and slowly drove past 1st Street and the Emporium. We're in luck. There's a spot right across from the little alley. Park there, Hank said, pointing at an empty patch of curb. Will parked the car, but left it running for a moment as he cautiously scanned the street to make sure no one was around. Finally, he turned the car off. Hank, I don't see a dumpster, Will said disappointedly as he looked down the dark alley directly across the street. What? Damn, what did they do with it? Hank complained as he leaned across Will and peered out the window. It doesn't matter, Will stated as he turned toward the back seat. Max, you can help us get up onto the roof. Once we're up there, come back to the car and keep a lookout. If you see anything suspicious, give a quick honk on the horn. Okay, William, Max agreed. Will looked up and down the street one last time and then opened his door. All right, let's go, Will said as he exited the car. The 3 friends quickly made their way across the street and into the alley. A few yards in, Will stopped near the wall of the Emporium and motioned for Max and Hank to come near him. This should be good enough, Will whispered. Max, boost me up first. Max gave a nod and then bent down slightly and cupped his hands together. Will stepped onto Max's hands and then climbed up onto his shoulders. Max then stood tall and held his hands up level with his shoulders. Will placed a foot onto each of Max's hands, and then Max lifted him up as high as he could. Will easily grabbed the ledge of the Emporium's roof and hoisted himself up and over. A moment later, he looked down over the edge and motioned for Hank to follow. It was only a matter of seconds before Hank was crouching next to Will. Will gave Max a thumbs up and then watched as he returned to the car. "So far, so good," Will whispered to Hank. "There's the first skylight," Hank said quietly as he pointed at a large, multi-pane glass skylight just a few yards away. "We should be above the market section. The warehouse section should be down there past that third skylight." "How do you know so much about this building anyway?" Will asked as they began to gingerly make their way toward the skylight. "I used to buy fish here once in a while," Hank answered nonchalantly. "You? Shopping at a place owned by Mo Sally?" Will asked with a look of ironic disbelief. "Mo didn't own it back then," Hank replied, shaking his head. "It was a long time ago, before everything that happened with your parents. Actually, around the time I first started working with your dad. I haven't been here since Mo bought it out." "Well, let's hope they haven't changed it much," Will said as they reached the skylight and carefully peered down into the building. The room below was dimly lit, but it was apparent that Hank was right. They were above the market section. Various refrigerated displays and service counters could be seen scattered around the large space. "I don't see anyone around," Hank noted. "Let's check the next one." Will nodded, and they quietly snuck to the next skylight. There they found a similar scene below. They moved on to the third skylight and found more of the same. "Okay, this next one should put us over the warehouse," Hank said as he led the way across the roof. The scene that met them below the fourth skylight was vastly different from the others. Boxes, barrels, and crates were stacked neatly around the room, and supply-filled shelving lined the walls. A dolly was standing near a stack of crates. Again, Hank's prediction was correct. It was the warehouse. "Keep going," Will said, waving Hank onward. The fifth skylight only revealed more crates and boxes. "Only one left," Hank noted. They made their way to the final skylight and scrutinized the scene that lay below their last window of hope. "Nothing. Damn," Will said in frustration. "Just more crates and boxes." "Sorry, Will," Hank sympathized. "I guess it's just one of those cases." "I guess it was a long shot," Will said disappointedly as he stepped away from the skylight. "I mean, Mo can have him stashed anywhere in the city. How are we going to find him, Hank?" "Don't give up yet," Hank encouraged. "I haven't given up," Will stated. "It's just frustrating having to start back at square one again." "I know," Hank replied. "Well, let's get off this roof before someone sees us, huh?" Will nodded in assent, and they turned to leave. They had only taken a few steps when they heard the sound of a door slamming shut somewhere in the room below. They both instantly froze and gave each other a knowing look. They quietly turned back toward the skylight and inched their way toward it. Suddenly, they heard a man's voice, a bit muffled though it was, that seemed to come from directly below the skylight. "Keep an eye on him," the man said. "I gotta be at the club by 9. Will and Hank made it back to the skylight and cautiously looked inside. "I don't see anyone," Will whispered, motioning for Hank to move over to the opposite side to get a different view. Hank carefully walked around the skylight, looked in to see if he could see anything, and then looked at Will and shrugged. Will made a motion with his hand to suggest that they wait and watch. Hank nodded in agreement. A moment later, they saw a man walk under the skylight and head toward the back of the building. "That's Jasper," Will mouthed, pointing below. Suddenly, they heard Jasper's voice. "You ain't brave, you know," shouted Jasper. "You may think you are, but you ain't. You're a fool. You'll see. When the boss gets back, you'll see. You'll want to talk then." Will and Hank waited for a few minutes. but nothing further transpired. Eventually, Hank crept back to where Will was. "What now?" Hank asked quietly. "Arthur has to be in there," Will replied. "You heard what they said." Hank nodded in agreement. "We need to get in there," Will stated. "It looks like Jasper may be the only one here right now, but it sounds like Mo may be coming back soon." "Let's try the service entrance," Hank suggested. Will agreed, and they both quietly made their way to the edge of the roof that bordered the alley. They peeked over the edge, and seeing no one around, they carefully helped each other down into the alley. Being careful to stay in the shadow of the wall, they made their way to the surface entrance of the warehouse, where they found both a regular personnel door and a large delivery gate. Will reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out 2 gloves and a small leather case. After donning the gloves, he unbuttoned the case and unfolded it to reveal a lock-picking set. Will knelt down in front of the personnel door and got to work while Hank kept watch. "There," Will eventually said with a satisfied air. "All set." Will took a tiny oil spray bottle from his kit and sprayed the hinges of the door. He then returned his tools to their case and replaced it in his jacket pocket. "We go in guns blazing," Will stated, taking his gun from his shoulder holster. "What?" Hank asked, hesitating a moment. "I'm just kidding. Come on," Will said with a slight chuckle. Will slowly and cautiously opened the door without making a sound. Hank entered, and then Will closed the door behind them. The 2 friends found themselves in a dark hallway, the end of which appeared to open onto the main warehouse floor. They carefully made their way to the opening at the far end and then stopped. Will peeked into the room and saw the many crates and boxes they had seen from above. Just off to his left, he could see the last skylight above his head. On his right, his line of sight was blocked by more crates and boxes. He looked back at Hank and motioned to the right, the direction they had seen Jasper take earlier. Will crept around the doorframe and made his way to a stack of crates. Hank took up the rear guard. Hidden behind the crates, Will now had a better view of the room. On his left was an open area. On his right, he could see more crates and boxes, and beyond that, the delivery gate. Directly ahead of him, there was an enclosed office. He turned right and made his way through the maze of supplies with Hank close behind. Will stopped just before reaching the delivery gate. A wide stretch of empty space separated him from the next source of cover on the opposite side of the gate. He was about to creep across when the door to the office suddenly opened and Jasper emerged. Will quickly moved back behind some crates. "Damn stench," Jasper complained. "How can you stand it, old man? Disgusting." Jasper closed the door and plopped down onto a nearby chair, leaning it back against the wall. A handgun sat ready on the table next to the chair. Will paused for a moment and then looked at Hank. He patted his gun and shrugged as if to say, "I guess we'll have to use a show of force." Hank nodded in agreement. Will took one last look around and then steeled himself for what was to come. Suddenly, there was a loud crash of breaking glass. Startled, Jasper lost his balance and the chair slipped out from under him, leaving him flat on his back. Will and Hank hunkered down and looked over toward the direction of the noise. There, below the shattered skylight, was the ominous figure of an automaton, crouching after the impact of its landing. It rose slowly and began to walk with a deliberate step toward Jasper. As the automaton made its way into a better source of light, Will realized that its body appeared more streamlined than Max's. It was also completely black, something Will had never seen before. By this time, Jasper had recovered himself and looked up to see the automaton approaching. He quickly rose and grabbed his gun, taking aim at the automaton. As Jasper fired, the automaton made a quick movement, easily dodging the bullet. Jasper fired again, but the automaton was too quick. In an instant, the automaton had closed the distance between them, caused Jasper to drop his gun, and grabbed him by the neck with its right hand, hoisting him into the air. Jasper began to choke and tried desperately to pry himself from the automaton's grip. His efforts were useless, though, as the automaton held on with vice-like force. The automaton turned back toward the skylight and looked up toward the roof. "Kill him," called a deep, raspy voice from the shadows of the roof outside. Will and Hank tried to see who was speaking, but they could only make out a part of a shadowy figure. As the automaton turned its attention back to Jasper, Will made a quick decision and took aim. He fired and hit the automaton squarely in the left shoulder. Without hesitating or even looking to see who had fired the shot, the automaton forcefully threw Jasper into a stack of crates and then turned and leapt into the office, crashing through the door with its left shoulder. A moment later, it ran out of the office, carrying a man over its shoulder. The automaton reached the skylight and jumped up through the opening with ease, vanishing into the night along with the mysterious figure. Will quickly gathered his senses and looked over to where Jasper was lying on the ground amidst the broken crates. He seemed to be either dead or unconscious. "We should get out of here," Will whispered. Hank nodded, and they carefully retraced their steps to the hallway and out into the alley. And that is chapter 14. We'll see you next time for chapter 15.